Cyberpunk 2077 has been the most talked about game for the last couple of years. Players were dying to get their hands on this game, and even though we had many delays, every single time that the game was delayed, it just made players more and more excited for the release until the game was actually released. Unfortunately, it has not gone down well. I have seen all of the different memes, the bad reports. I've also seen gameplay on Xbox Ones and PlayStation 4s, and it does not look good. CD Projekt Red have even gone as far to give refunds out for those that just don't enjoy the game, only for Sony to turn around and reject some of those refund requests. The whole thing has been a complete mess. But despite everything that's been going on with the release of this game, I wanted to develop an opinion for myself. I started the game, played all the way through the story, even went through some side content, side missions, looked for a load of different stuff. I put a lot of hours into this game, and this is where I give my opinion on everything. But before I do get into the video, if you do want to talk more in depth about Cyberpunk 2077, then there will be a link in the description down below, which will take you over to the Twitch stream. I stream every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So if you are interested in that, as I said, there'll be a link in the description down below. Just head over to there, drop a follow, and you'll be notified the next time I go live. So getting back into the video, I have spent many hours playing Cyberpunk 2077. I got a really high rank within Street Cred, and I used that to go and do different videos of unlocking different vehicles as well as different cyberware, and I've also managed to complete the main story. And with this is my review, so I will be going through absolutely everything, including the ending that I managed to get. So this will be your one and only warning throughout this video, because spoiler alert, I'm going to be going through the story, I'm going to be talking about it, because I cannot give a good review without actually talking about what happened. So if you don't want to know the endings of Cyberpunk 2077, then I highly recommend that you just click off this video right now, because we will be talking about it, and we're going to be talking about it somewhat in depth. So this is the time to click off the video. So the first thing that I do want to talk about is actually the story. And to begin with, I wouldn't say the story was amazing, but I knew that at the beginning of going into this game. With something having multiple endings, branching dialogue, it is so much more work for any game company, any game developer to polish that compared to a simple, straightforward linear story. There are so many different possibilities that could happen, and to polish that all to a good level is going to take a lot longer. So I never expected Cyberpunk to have the best narrative ever, for the narrative itself to blow me away, and quite simply it didn't. With that said though, I do think that Cyberpunk has an amazing branching dialogue system. It's very good, and the consequences of your decisions are in depth. You get side missions that would link into the main narrative dependent on your choices. Now, that's not every single side mission that you go into. There's some side missions in particular. One that I'm going to be referencing, and I'll probably carry on referencing it because it is a good example of a number of different things within this game, is the Beast in Me. This is a side job that you can get from Claire, who is the bartender in the afterlife. Once you progress far enough within the story and you get a higher street cred rank, she will actually contact you about racing. And this has a very good narrative system, branching dialogue, multiple endings within just this side job. And depending on the decisions that you make, if you pick the wrong one, Claire will be mad at you for every single time that you go back to the afterlife bar, which is involved within the main story. So depending what you do within this side job also affects what could happen within the main narrative. And I think this is a very, very good touch. And this is just an example of one thing. Looking at the main narrative itself, the ending came at a bit of a surprise. Normally with games, you get to a point where you feel like you're approaching the end. This comes down to a couple different factors. The main factor is how much time you've actually spent playing. You get to a point at the 30-hour mark where you realize that you've played for a very, very long time, and it must be coming towards the end of the game soon. Another factor for other games is the narrative itself. And you can see this with the intensity of what is the narrative. At the beginning, you have your exposition that goes into rise in action. And then right to the top with the most intensity throughout the whole game is the climax. As soon as you've reached the climax, that's when you get the fall in action, and then you get your denouement. When you transition from these different points within a narrative structure, you can actually feel it. So once you get to the climax and you get that fall in action, you know it. But with Cyberpunk, I never really felt it. And when I did get into that final mission talking to Hanako, I went to the elevator, V started coughing, all of a sudden I then woke up talking to Vic, and he's talking about how it's coming towards the end. This was just such a sudden cut, and there wasn't any slow fade transition between. It was 1 minute you're about to solve a major issue, only for it to be immediately cut from the fallen action and just go straight into the denouement. I also got an ending that I didn't expect or I didn't even want. As said, 1 minute I was talking to Hanako, and then the next minute I was talking to Victor. Another minute after that, I'm standing on a roof with pills in my hand. And I'm thinking, with what's just happened within the narrative, how Vic is talking to V, how Misty's talking to V, and also how Johnny Silverhand is talking to V, this is the end. And I have to pick the suicide route, which is taking these pills. Once Misty did take me onto the roof and I was talking to her and Johnny Silverhand, there was an option to throw the pills. So I selected that because I thought that was the thing that was going to allow me to carry on playing, only for a game cinematic to be played and for V to shoot himself in the head. This is not what I wanted. The whole narrative structure here of how it rushed straight into the ending of the game made me think that the pills were there for a way for V to opt out, but it actually wasn't. The pills were actually blockers to prevent V from seeing Johnny Silverhand for a certain amount of time. The whole narrative and dialogue system at this point really confused me. Even after I completed all of this, I was so confused and baffled with what just happened because I thought the pills were there just for a way for V to opt out. I even went back to the recording of it just to watch it again, and I still got the exact same impression. With what's been said by Vic and Misty, that it's the end. And because it's the end, they're giving me these pills because they want me just to take the easy way out. So the ending is pretty weird. There is obviously multiple endings, so I did actually go back and play again, and for the second time I did actually take the pills. This led to a bit more of an ending. Still wasn't a great ending, but it still was a bit better where I had that fallen action and then it came to the ending rather than it being climax and then all of a sudden the game has just ended. So those are my thoughts of the main story. It's not an amazing story, but it's not necessarily a bad story. It's somewhere in between being pretty decent to even good, which is actually kind of what I expected. The thing that's probably the most amazing thing out of this game is the side missions. I would say that the side missions are the best thing about Cyberpunk. Each one that you go into, and this isn't the NCPD scanners or some of those little side activities because they're sort of repeated just in different areas, but actually the side jobs themselves, each one has a completely different story. And as already mentioned, depending who you're actually interacting with, some of these can link into the main story. It doesn't actually affect the ending that you get, but it does change how characters will interact with you within the main narrative. I think this is very cool. With this, I don't think there's actually been a game as in-depth as this with how the side jobs will actually interact with the narrative, and also how far these side jobs would go. So with the main narrative, it is shorter than what The Witcher 3 was, but it does look like with the time that they had spared, they actually put that into side missions. I actually haven't really got that much of a bad thing to say about side missions. I'm actually starting my second playthrough of Cyberpunk because I want to get every single possible ending so I can put a video together, but I know even with that second playthrough, I'm going to get distracted and I'm gonna go into side missions, even if it is side missions that I've completed before. That's how good they are. Another experience that I think was relatively good was just the free roam experience. Combat was very fun. I do feel like there was a slight disappointment with how long it took me to actually get into different types of cyberware. In the position that I am in right now, I understand a lot more. I do now understand that you can get free cyberware by doing certain things and going to certain locations, but I didn't understand that on my first playthrough. So for me to get the Mantis Blades, I did need to put one hell of a grind in to get to rank 20 within my street cred and also get a decent amount of money, to then use that money in street cred to go to the Ripper Dock to buy the Mantis Blades. So for me, it did take quite a bit of time, but when I did finally get the Mantis Blades, I had a lot of fun with them. It's also the same with different types of weapons. I feel like the game was incredibly balanced with being able to take an assault rifle to even just using a revolver. I ran around with whatever weapon that I wanted to run around with how I envisioned my character being. And then I was able to apply attribute points in areas that I wanted to apply to improve my character being proficient within that area. So there was a lot of times where I ran around with a katana, And I decided to change it up, and I actually wanted to use pistols and revolvers instead. And I was able to change to that playstyle. And then I went back to a playstyle where I wanted to get a lot closer, and I started to use the mantis blades. When switching to playstyles, there was never a point of where I felt disadvantaged because I spent so much time building up one playstyle that now that I've changed, I have to start from the bottom. So I would say that the combat was well balanced. One thing with free roam that I've never ever done with any other game before is I actually spent more time walking and running about than I actually did driving. And this is mixed with a very good positive, but also a negative. The positive is that by mixing combat and also exploration with the different events and side jobs around, it was just fun to run point to point to point to see what I can actually find. The negative, which also brings us on to the next point, is driving. Driving was absolutely terrible. The fast vehicles within the game didn't feel fast. They felt incredibly sluggish when going around corners, and to get up to the top speed, it was just boring. CD Projekt Red even said before the release of Cyberpunk that driving is supposed to be more realistic than the likes of GTA, but this just isn't true. Yes, GTA is pretty unrealistic by actually controlling a car mid-air. Don't get me wrong, it is unrealistic. But when we're talking about GTA driving actually on the ground compared to Cyberpunk driving actually on the ground, it's very different, to the point of where GTA is still probably more realistic than Cyberpunk's. Because even within Cyberpunk 2077, when you're driving 200 miles per hour with a ray-filled erudite, you've hit that max speed, and you jump out that car at that speed, you can easily get out on your feet with no damage whatsoever. And we could put loads of different theories together, with there being cyberware within Cyberpunk 2077 which prevents you from taking damage from moving vehicles. But at no point within the game or the lore has anything like that been said, and at no point have I gone to the Ripperdoc to apply cyberware to prevent this from happening. This just gave a very unrealistic view of driving within the game. Also, another very disappointing factor, and this is probably more for me than anyone else, CD Projekt Red really hyped up racing. They talked about it years ago with racing being in the game, with a slight twist. This slight twist ended up being death races, which was revealed within one of the Night City wires, which also included a vehicle trailer. Unfortunately, races are locked behind one of the side jobs, and those are the only races within the game. So once you complete this side job, because it's also got its own narrative, you can't play it anymore. And if you're like me, where I did go through some of these side jobs very early on to get my street cred up so I can buy into the ray-filled erudite, I finally got the ray-filled erudite, but there was no way for me to actually use it within any races. It was now just a tool to get from point A to point B and nothing else. So races were very disappointing. Moving on to some of the general stuff within Cyberpunk, I played on a next-gen console, being a PlayStation 5. So for me, I was in a very good position to not have as many issues as what other players were having. I've seen the stuff with players playing on Xbox One and also PlayStation 4s. It is incredibly bad. I still had a few things such as assets being weird, stuff floating, and I also had a few crashes, but I expected that with a new game. But there is one moment which just made me feel that CD Projekt Red were just extremely lazy, and this is when you head out to the Badlands. For a lot of players, including myself, I was curious how far you can actually go. This is always a thought that pops into someone's head when playing a free roam game. How far can you travel until you're reset and put back into the map? When traveling out to the Badlands, the whole area is just filled with rubbish. And this isn't actually the area where you're outside the map at this point. You're still within the map, and with this area you will find a lot of floating assets. It just seems like CD Projekt Red got to this area and thought, well, players aren't supposed to be here, so we might as well just take the assets that's been designed for this area and just throw them in, without even seeing whether or not these assets are actually on the ground. This is one of those things where it's not the biggest problem within the game, but when you do just head over to there and you do see that, it does take away from the immersion, and it's a very easy problem to solve. So with all of this, and I know this has been a long video, trying to go through each and every little component of the game and give my opinion with my experience of playing through it. But all in all, my experience with Cyberpunk was just good. I don't feel like it was amazing, and I definitely wasn't blown away by it. I know I was very hyped for this game before the release, but I still had realistic expectations of what CD Projekt Red can offer. I always knew that there were going to be major bugs on day one. I never had the attitude that a lot of other players had, where because of how many delays the CD Projekt Red have put on Cyberpunk 2077, that some players expected it to be bug-free on the release. I did many videos saying how this was never ever going to happen, no matter the game company, no matter the game. So I never had an opinion before the release that this game was going to be the best of the best of the best, something that no one has ever seen before. And still, with that relatively low expectation, it still didn't really exceed it. If you are a player that hasn't got this game and you are looking to get into it, my recommendation is that just wait for a bit. Wait for there to be a few more patches for Cyberpunk, and hopefully this will make it a bit more stable. And I also recommend that you don't buy it for PlayStation 4 or Xbox One. Look for PC or next-gen consoles, being PlayStation 5 or Xbox Series X or Series S. This is a next-gen game, and CD Projekt Red should have never released it or even advertised it as a game for previous gen. If CD Projekt Red do push out some good patches which does fix a lot of the main issues within the game, then you can have a very enjoyable experience. It's just not an experience that's going to absolutely blow you away. But anyway, those are my thoughts on Cyberpunk 2077. I'm going to carry on playing the game because there are quite a few things that I want to do. So you will still see videos here on this channel relating to Cyberpunk. So if I'm carrying on playing, it must still be a good sign. But do let me know all your thoughts in the comment section down below. What were your thoughts based on this game? Was it something that you absolutely loved playing through every second of every moment of this game? Was this something that you absolutely hated? Maybe you were one of the players that tried to get a refund from Sony. Let me know all your thoughts in the comment section down below. If you do want to talk more in depth, as said at the beginning of this video, there will be a link in the description which will take you over to the Twitch stream. Head over to there, drop a follow, and you'll be notified the next time I go live. But anyway guys, I hope you guys did enjoy. If you did enjoy, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. But for now, I'm going, so see ya.